Today, let's talk about the sexual harassment case, or maybe it's more accurate to call it a false accusation case, at Wuhan University. I didn't expect it to cause such a huge stir. Right now, all the official social media accounts of Wuhan University have shut down their comment sections because people flooded them, calling out the school and demanding justice. People are questioning, just based on one emotional little essay written by a cute girl. You went ahead and punished a male student, Xiao Mingtao, and now you're not fixing your mistake? You haven't apologized to him, and you're not taking any action against the girl who falsely accused him. So Wuhan University got scared and closed all the comments. But once the comments were closed, where did all these outraged people go? They rushed to Lei Jun's account. As everyone knows, he's one of Wuhan University's most famous alumni and donated 1.1 billion yuan to the school. So now people are asking him, Lei Jun, what's your take on this? What do you think about the girl, Yang Jingyuan?
大家好，我是小米公司的雷军。大家都知道我是武汉大学的校友。我觉得武汉大学呢是中国最美丽的大学。如果你们相信梦想的力量，那么欢迎你们报考武汉大学。我在珞珈山等你。
People were saying, if you don't speak up, we'll start boycotting Xiaomi products, even Xiaomi cars. Word has it, Lei Jun's follower count dropped by 5,000 overnight, just because he stayed silent. Then a bunch of people came to me asking, Wang Zhu, Wuhan University is your alma mater. Why aren't you saying anything? Do you dare speak out or not? If you don't, you're just being cowardly. We'll boycott your show too, Wang Zhu's verdict. And since last week, the thesis of the girl involved, Yang Jingyuan, started going viral on CNKI. As of Sunday, her master's thesis had been downloaded over 62,000 times. That's a crazy number. It's now ranked second among all Wuhan University theses on CNKI. And mind you, every other thesis in the top 10 is a PhD dissertation. But Yang Jingyuan, with just one master's thesis, managed to climb to number 2, possibly headed for number 1. I bet CNKI is thrilled, because downloading a paper on CNKI costs money. In just a few days, Yang Jingyuan alone generated over 60,000 yuan in revenue for them. So in this whole mess, who's really the victim? That's debatable. But CNKI, definitely the biggest winner. I mean, who would have downloaded her thesis if not for this news? It's just a regular master's paper, right? This shows how one incident can bring joy to some and misery to others. And speaking of me, honestly, I'm a little worried too. What if the public decides to boycott Wang Zhu's verdict? You know, our show's viewership has already dropped off a cliff over the past 6 months. Things were going downhill anyway, and if people now start boycotting us, that's just adding insult to injury. So, as an alumnus of Wuhan University, I feel I have to say something. I need to speak clearly and directly about this disgraceful event at my own school. I want to lay out exactly what I think about this situation. First, let me walk you through how it all started. It goes back 2 years, July 11th, 2023, inside the Wuhan University Library. Back when I was a student there, the library wasn't that big. But in 2011, they expanded it. Several new sections were added, and the facilities became pretty modern. So now a lot of students like to study there. Why? Because it's spacious, more comfortable than classrooms, and there's air conditioning. They even offer free water. So naturally, students prefer studying at the library. Now, the study areas in the library aren't classrooms. They're more like open corridors. There's a walkway in the middle with tables on both sides. That's where students sit and study. On the night of July 11th, according to Yang Jingyuan, she said those tables are usually quite open, and normally one student takes one table. But that night, while she was studying, there was a male student sitting across from her.
我要出去读东西，所以我坐在那个位置，而且那个位置是有2排位置的，一排是坐4个人，另一排坐2个人。那个位置除了就2个人相约一起来上自习，他会坐在那个地方以外，剩下他不会。所以在下午5点钟的时候，他坐在我对面，我当时就有点奇怪。那我说这个人怎么坐我对面了？因为一般都是一个人在坐。
Now she never actually said whether the guy sat there first or if she did. But either way, the guy ended up sitting across from her, and she started feeling a bit uneasy. She's a pretty cautious girl, and by around 6 o'clock, maybe closer to 6:20 or 6:30, she felt something wasn't quite right.
那你怎么觉得他是在做那件不可描述的事情？
因为桌子在晃，我是因为桌子晃才注意到的。
She started to suspect that the guy was doing something inappropriate. Now, We don't know whether she actually bent down to check what he was doing under the table. But starting around 7 p.m., she began recording him with her phone under the desk. She took 5 separate videos from about 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. The total footage adds up to a little over 4 minutes. You have to say, this girl had pretty good timing. Except for one clip that didn't catch much, the other 4 all captured the guy's lower half. In those videos, you can see the guy pressing down on his crotch area with his hand. And to be fair, the girl was quite sharp. She timed everything well and filmed like she knew what she was doing. In one video, she walks out of the library first, then turns on her phone while coming back in. The footage is shaky as she walks, but as soon as she gets to her seat, the phone slides naturally under the table and starts recording the guy's crotch area, where his hand is pressing down. She clearly suspected he was masturbating. And doing that right across from a girl, naturally, any woman would feel that's sexual harassment. Around 8:10 p.m., the guy finished studying and was getting ready to leave. That's when the girl suddenly stood up and stopped him. She said, "Don't go. You need to explain yourself. What kind of filthy things have you been doing?" The guy panicked. He immediately started apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry. I beg you, please. I'm begging you."
那你刚才这样事情的时候，你觉得我是愿意的吗？
我是对不起，因为我说我一定帮你马上删了我的好的身上的细节，这是我错的。
写。辅导员的联系方式也写下面。
这个私下解决。
我没有在这个地方公共场所张出来，就已经是私下解决了。你也是学法的，你也知道，我现在要找你要什么责任，你是敲诈你，我不做这种事情，但我要求合理的道歉。
这个我现在想道歉，我愿意私下解决。
我不要钱，我要你能有几个钱？
我想表达我的歉意。
好，那你就写就可以了。
这个别让我出来，别叫我这个。
不是我害了你，是你自己做这个事情的。我也是学法律的，这是我自己合法的权益。
So the guy started confessing. He said, "I did something wrong. I'm ashamed." And right there, he began writing a statement. The girl told him, "Write it clearly." So the guy started writing, "I'm sorry. I took photos of the young lady and violated her privacy. I was wrong." But after reading it, the girl said, "You took photos of me? That doesn't seem right. Did you actually take any?" She asked him to open his phone and check. Turns out, no photos. So she asked, "Then why are you writing this?" The guy said, "Then I'll delete all that and rewrite it." While rewriting, the girl told him, "Don't make it all fancy and vague. Just say clearly what exactly you did." So the guy wrote that he had done indecent things in front of the girl, that he was wrong, had caused her harm, and would never do it again. He asked for her forgiveness. He signed his name, wrote down his student number, and even left the contact number of their academic counselor, Liu Di, from the School of Foreign Languages. And just like that, July 11th ended. On July 12th, the girl, Yang Jingyuan, got in touch with Mr. Liu Di from the Foreign Languages School. On July 13th, she met with Liu Di, and she recorded their conversation. During the meeting, she made a few demands. That the guy should not be allowed to join the Communist Party during his time in college, that he shouldn't be eligible for scholarships or awards, and that he should be barred from applying for graduate school recommendations. After hearing the complaint, Liu Di said the matter would be handled through proper procedures. He asked which department Yang Jingyuan belonged to at Wuhan University, but she refused to say. She replied, "What's the point of telling you that?" So the communication between them began. Liu Di went back and reported the situation to the school. After internal discussions, they decided on a plan. On July 17th, Xiao Mingtao's parents would come to campus to meet the girl in person and apologize on their son's behalf. But on July 16th, the day before the meeting, Yang Jingyuan sent a letter to Liu Di, refusing to meet. She said meeting in person felt unsafe and unnecessary. In that letter, she also pushed back against Liu Di's claim that this would ruin Xiao Mingtao. She said she had already shown him leniency. After all, she didn't call the police that night. The implication was, if she had, the guy might have already been arrested. She also didn't see denying him awards or grad school opportunities as ruining him. In her view, it was a way to help him reflect and become a better person. So the meeting on July 17th didn't happen. Then, Wuhan University went on summer break. When school resumed in September, around the 20th, Yang Jingyuan emailed Liu Di again. No response. She followed up on WeChat, and Liu Di replied that the case was still being processed. Back and forth, the communication went. By October, Liu Di finally responded, saying that the school had retrieved surveillance footage from the library on July 11th. But the video quality was poor. They couldn't clearly see what the male student had done. The evidence, it seemed, wasn't strong enough. Yang Jingyuan was furious. She said, "With all this evidence, you're still handling it like this. You're protecting him." Liu Di responded that the faculty leadership was willing to speak with her directly, but Yang Jingyuan refused. She said she had serious doubts about whether the foreign languages school was capable of handling this fairly. So on October 11th, 2023, the girl published an article on a public WeChat account titled "How I Was Sexually Harassed in the Wuhan University Library." In the post, she laid out the full story, everything that had happened. She also mentioned that there was someone on the scene who witnessed it and even passed her a handwritten note. That note said something like, "Miss, you're very brave. I was also there and recorded audio. I'm not sure if anything got captured, but I admire your courage. If you ever need a witness, I'll stand up for you." So from her side, there was audio, a written apology, and even a witness. But the foreign languages school kept delaying and taking no action. She felt Wuhan University was clearly trying to protect the guy. At the end of her article, she also made a public call, saying that Wuhan University, like all Chinese universities, needs to build a real system to prevent sexual harassment. Once that article came out, it exploded. The narrative spread like wildfire. A male student from Wuhan University, a total creep, masturbated in a public space like the library, right in front of a girl. People online began doxing and harassing the guy. In her article, she even posted the apology letter. While she blurred out the guy's name, she left Liu Di's name and contact details visible. So Liu Di started getting bombarded with calls and messages, and soon the guy's identity was fully exposed. His name, Xiao Mingtao. Then rumors started swirling. People claimed he was a government official's son, that his dad was a district mayor in Wuhan. The idea was that he had powerful family connections, and with the help of Wuhan University, was now bullying this girl into silence. The university was shaken. That very night, October 11th, they quickly formed a task force. Just 2 days later, on October 13th, they issued a disciplinary decision. The decision stated that Xiao Mingtao had engaged in inappropriate behavior in the library and would be punished. The punishment. A disciplinary warning that would stay on record for 12 months. But Xiao Mingtao's family didn't accept this quietly. That same night, October 11th, Xiao Mingtao and his mother, Chen Dan, went straight to the Lojia Hill police station near Wuhan University. They reported the girl for defamation, saying she falsely accused him of sexual harassment online. That's when the situation really blew up. The police reportedly brought in a few people to take statements. First, they questioned Xiao Mingtao and asked, "Why did you write what you did in that apology letter?" Xiao Mingtao answered, "I don't even know what was going on. I didn't understand it at the time." He said it wasn't until the next day, when he spoke to his mother, that he learned the girl thought he had been masturbating at the scene. Then he started to wonder. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe he had eczema and was scratching himself, and that got misinterpreted. The police asked again, "If you weren't doing anything indecent, then why did you write a confession? Why did you tell her you'd done something dirty?" Xiao Mingtao said he panicked. He was scared and just wanted to settle things quickly so he could leave. Then the police brought in 2 more people. One was Xiao Mingtao's mother. She told the police that her son had eczema and even provided some supporting evidence. They also interviewed a so-called third-party witness, Huang Qixin, the person who had passed the note to the girl that night. In his official statement, Huang Qixin said that all he saw was the 2 of them having some kind of confrontation. He didn't actually see the guy making any physical movements, nor did he hear anything that sounded like verbal harassment. When the police tried to contact Yang Jingyuan to give her own statement, she never showed up. She never had any direct interaction with the police. That was all back in October 2023. Fast forward to February 2024. Xiao Mingtao's mom made a post on Weibo. In that post, she said her son had been wronged. Why? Because he had eczema, which caused constant itching, especially around the groin area. She provided various pieces of evidence. On July 10th, just a day before the incident, she said their driver had gone out to buy anti-itch cream. She also posted chat logs between her husband and some Wuhan-based doctors discussing the condition, and later included hospital visit records from November and December, showing that her son had, in fact, been diagnosed with eczema in that area. She also talked about the toll all this had taken on her son. After the online backlash, he suffered emotionally and mentally. He was kicked out of WeChat groups at school. developed severe stress reactions, and even had suicidal thoughts. Medical records confirming his diagnosis of psychological trauma were posted too. At this point, public opinion began to shift a bit. Meanwhile, Southern Metropolis Daily published a relatively neutral article on the case. Then, on June 22nd last year, the girl graduated with her master's degree. The day she received her diploma, she told her lawyer, "Now that I've got my certificate, we can proceed." She officially filed a lawsuit at the Wuhan Economic and Technological Development Zone Court. Her demands? She wanted the male student to publish an apology in a provincial level or higher newspaper in Hubei for 15 consecutive days, and to pay her 5,000 yuan in compensation. So the case entered the legal process. There were 2 court sessions, one in July and another in November last year. Then finally, this year, just last week, the court delivered its verdict. And this is what really triggered the public storm. The judgment did not recognize Xiao Mingtao's actions as sexual harassment. It rejected all of Yang Jingyuan's claims. Now, was that ruling reasonable? That's what I want to break down today. We all know lawsuits are won on evidence. And this case is quite different from the usual sexual harassment cases we've seen. Here, both parties were equals. In most workplace harassment cases, there's a power imbalance, like a boss harassing a subordinate. So the burden of proof is often different. For example, if a female student falsely accuses her professor, and the professor can't provide hard evidence to prove his innocence, the presumption often leans toward believing the student. That's just how the burden of proof tends to work in those situations. That's exactly because the burden of proof is not the same in every type of case. But in this situation, between Xiao Mingtao and Yang Jingyuan, there was no power dynamic, no authority or status difference between the two. So the responsibility to provide evidence should be equal. That's why, right at the beginning of the court's decision, it clearly says, if you're the one making the accusation, it's your responsibility to provide the evidence. If the person you're accusing also presents counter-evidence, and in the end, the facts remain unclear, then the court has to assume the event did not happen. In other words, you didn't reach the threshold of proving your case with a preponderance of evidence. Now let's look at what evidence each side brought to the table. On Yang Jingyuan's side, she submitted 5 video clips, all taken between 7 and 8 p.m. on July 11th. The total length is around 4 minutes. She also included the handwritten apology letter Xiao gave her that night, in which he admitted to doing something indecent to her. On top of that, she had audio recordings of her interactions with Xiao during the confrontation in the library. These 3 items, video, letter, and audio, were her main pieces of evidence. Besides that, she also submitted screenshots of her WeChat conversation with Huang Qiqin, the student who passed her a note during the incident. From the messages, it seems Huang was on her side. There were also her chats with Liu Di, the academic counselor at the School of Foreign Languages, which were part of the evidence. As for the defendant, Xiao Mingtao, he submitted records showing a long history of eczema. As early as 2020, his mother had reminded him to apply ointment regularly. In 2021, his father had spoken with doctors about itching in his son's groin area. Doctors suspected dermatitis and referred them to dermatology. On July 10th, the day before the incident, his mother even had their driver go buy more ointment. Then, in November and December of that year, Xiao went to the hospital and was officially diagnosed with eczema. He also submitted records of a medical appointment that happened shortly before the July 11th incident. But because the appointment was booked through an online app and used a different name, the court did not accept it as valid evidence. In addition, Xiao's team submitted an expert opinion from medical professionals in Wuhan who analyzed the 5 video clips. They concluded that his hand movements didn't look like masturbation, but more like pressing or scratching to relieve itching. He also brought in several witnesses, including one classmate named Qi Yumin. Qi testified that he had often seen Xiao scratching his groin area over his pants during daily life and confirmed that Xiao had eczema, so the behavior wasn't unusual. The defense also provided materials from when Xiao and his mother filed a police report at the Luojia Hill station. This included official transcripts of the police interviews. What's surprising here is that even though the police never formally opened a case, Xiao's team managed to get access to the interview records, something that usually requires a court request. But if you read the judgment carefully, it's clear that these were submitted directly by the defense, not obtained by the court. There were 3 transcripts from the police interviews, one with Xiao Mingtao, one with his mother, and one with Huang Qixin. Among them, the most important was the one with Huang Qixin. That's because the plaintiff, Yang Jingyuan, had also submitted her own evidence from Huang, like their WeChat conversations and that handwritten note, which, in her view, supported the claim that the male student had sexually harassed her at the scene. But when Huang Qixin gave his official statement to the police, he said all he saw was the 2 of them talking. He didn't witness any physical contact or hear anything that could be considered sexual harassment. In other words, his statement ended up proving nothing. So those were some of the materials submitted by the defendant. The court also retrieved the university's official disciplinary decision from Wuhan University for reference. That pretty much rounds up what both sides provided. So how did the court ultimately reach its decision and reject all of the plaintiff's claims? Sexual harassment can involve physical contact, verbal comments, gestures, facial expressions, many forms. But there's one key element. It must be sexual in nature. Now, in the video clips showing Xiao Mingtao, there's no question that his behavior looked inappropriate. He was pressing down on his crotch area with his hand. That part is undisputed. But whether that behavior was inappropriate or sexual is where the 2 sides had completely different views. The girl claimed he was masturbating. The defendant said he was scratching because of eczema. So why did the court end up rejecting the plaintiff's argument? I think there were a few major reasons. First, the defendant provided very clear and solid evidence that he had eczema. That included the fact that on July 10th, just 1 day before the incident, his mom had asked someone to buy anti-eczema ointment. There were also WeChat conversations between his family and doctors, plus a formal medical diagnosis confirming the condition afterward. This chain of evidence was very strong and consistent. It's pretty clear he did have eczema. I don't think that part is really in question. Now, my guess is that the girl probably didn't know he had eczema at the time of the incident. Second, there's the apology letter. The girl submitted it as evidence, and in it, the boy did admit to doing something indecent to her. But the court felt this letter didn't line up with the later audio recording or the plaintiff's later claims. Why? Because the apology letter simply said he had done something vulgar or inappropriate, but didn't specify what exactly he did. And in the audio, the girl only said vaguely that he did something dirty, without directly stating what the act was. But later, in her lawsuit, she explicitly accused him of masturbation. So the court believed there was a contradiction between her evidence and her legal claim. Also, many people have heard that recording. I've listened to it multiple times myself. In it, the girl sounds extremely forceful, really pushing the boy hard.
那你刚才这样事情的时候，你觉得我是愿意的吗？
我是对不起，是愿意的。我一定帮你马上删了我的保护的宣传和细节，这个是我错的。
写呢？辅导员的联系方式也写下面。
这个私下解决。
我没有在这个地方公共场所张出来，就已经是私下解决了。你也是学法的，你也知道，我现在要找你要求就觉得你是敲诈你，我不做这种事情，但我要求合理的道歉。
这个我现在想道歉，我愿意私下解决。
我不要钱，我要你说你能有几个钱
The boy was pleading with her, saying things like, "Sister, can we go somewhere else to talk?" But she refused. "No, we'll talk right here." It gave people the impression that he was being pressured, that the girl had him cornered somehow. Whether what he wrote or said was truly voluntary, that's hard to say. The court didn't directly address this point in the ruling, but after listening to the audio myself, and based on what some legal scholars have said, the general view is that this kind of situation raises real questions about consent. In tense, high-pressure moments like that, it's difficult to determine whether someone's statements are made of their own free will. And this doesn't just apply to women. Sure, we often hear the argument in cases involving female victims. Why didn't you say no? Or didn't you agree? That kind of thinking is everywhere online. But in reality, men can experience the same thing. Some freeze up, panic, or just comply out of fear. It's hard to say for sure whether what they say in those moments reflects their true intentions. And this makes things especially complicated for women in harassment cases, where society already tends to doubt them. But ironically, In this case, that same complexity worked against the girl too. Another key issue was the audio recording the girl submitted to the court. It was 16 minutes long. But surveillance footage from the library showed that their confrontation lasted about 26 minutes. That means 10 minutes were missing from the recording. What does that suggest? It raises the question, did she deliberately cut something out? If the full conflict lasted 26 minutes and she only turned in 16, the court inferred that the part she left out probably didn't work in her favor. So they concluded that the recording was incomplete, and that made it less credible. This missing audio became an important reason the court gave less weight to her evidence. Finally, there was the testimony from Huang Qiqin. His statements were inconsistent. In the messages and note he gave to the girl, he seemed to support her claims. But when the police interviewed him, he said he didn't witness anything. No gestures, no inappropriate comments, nothing. The court chose to believe the version he gave the police. They felt that when he was speaking to law enforcement, he was more likely being honest. That contradiction in Huang's statements ended up being a major reason the girl's evidence was called into question. Now, moving on to the evidence provided by the male student's side, I personally think there were a few key items that raised serious doubts in the court's mind. One, as I just mentioned, was Huang Qiqin's contradictory testimony. The other was from a witness named Qi Yumin, who was brought in by the defendant. Qi testified that he had seen Xiao Mingtao scratching his crotch area through his pants on other occasions, that this was something he regularly did. That testimony actually worked pretty strongly in the boy's favor. So, taking everything into account, the court ultimately concluded that while the girl believed the boy was masturbating, the evidence she provided simply wasn't enough to prove her claim. And based on what was submitted, it was entirely plausible that his behavior was caused by eczema. He was just scratching an itch. In other words, there wasn't enough to prove that his actions were sexual in nature. That was the first key point. The second point relates to what counts as sexual harassment under the law. For behavior to qualify as harassment, it has to go against the other person's will, and it has to be directed at them. It has to be intentional and perceived by the target. The court believed that in this case, those conditions weren't met. The library is an open environment. Xiao wasn't just facing this one girl. There were other people around too. And during that whole period, the girl left her seat several times, and so did the boy. In other words, she had multiple chances to walk away, but didn't. What's more, during the hour or two that they were in the same space, the girl never once tried to speak to the boy. She didn't knock on the desk or say something like, "Hey, what are you doing?" She didn't express any discomfort or rejection directly. In fact, she was seen chatting and laughing with someone at a nearby table. At one point, she even looked over at the books on the boy's desk, maybe trying to find out his name. These actions didn't show someone feeling harassed or offended. So the court concluded that there was no clear sign that the boy's actions were directed at the girl or that they clearly went against her will. And for that reason, they ruled in favor of the male student and dismissed all of the girl's claims.
好的，那他有看你吗？或者是有打招呼
有
吗？
没有跟我打招呼，但是他经常在看我。
哦，你们有对视吗？
我有看他，但他看到我，他眼神立马就收回了。
就没有直接的长时间的对视，但是你有看他，他有看你，但是他只要知道你在看他的时候，他就避免跟你目光的长时间对视，是吗？
对。
I think there were some other things that probably influenced the court's judgment. Like that article the girl posted online on October 11th. Some of the details she shared were clearly not true, and that likely made the judge question whether she was really being honest. For example, she said in the article that the boy wrote her an apology letter but used a fake name, and she blurred it out to protect him. But his mom later came out and said, no, her son wrote his real name, his actual student number, and even left a real phone number. So that part, clearly made up. She also claimed that the boy's family had been trying to contact her privately to offer money and settle the matter quietly. But the boy's family flat out denied that. They said they never offered any kind of payment or tried to negotiate. When stuff like this doesn't add up, it makes people wonder if she's trustworthy. And that likely affected the judge's overall impression of her. Because if one part of your story turns out to be false, it casts doubt on everything else you're saying. In the end, the court rejected all her claims. And honestly, I think the verdict itself makes sense. Based on the evidence, there wasn't enough to prove what she said happened. But here's something that's been going around online. People are asking, since she lost the case, Does that mean she made a false accusation? I don't think that's the right way to look at it. False accusation means you know it's fake, but you still report it anyway. That's not what this looks like. The guy did act weird. She caught it on camera. He really was moving his hand around his crotch area. That part wasn't made up. She thought it looked like he was masturbating, so she reported it. That's not a baseless claim. It was based on what she saw, even if it turned out to be something else. Now, if she keeps pushing this same claim after the court has already ruled, that's another story. Whether that crosses the line into false accusation is debatable, but continuing to stir things up after the verdict, that's definitely not okay. Now here's the thing. China's current laws on sexual harassment mainly focus on protecting women and children. There's barely any legal definition or recognition when it comes to women harassing men. So in practice, harassment is almost always framed as male to female. A situation where a woman harasses a man, it's basically not acknowledged in the law. And that's exactly why a lot of people are unhappy with this verdict. Think about it. What if the roles were reversed? What if a guy secretly filmed a girl under the table, took 5 videos of her from that angle? Even if the girl wasn't doing anything inappropriate, people would still call that sexual harassment, right? Filming someone's private area like that, without consent, would absolutely be considered harassment. Now, in this case, I believe the girl probably did intend to collect evidence. That part is understandable. But still, 5 videos, that's pushing it. If your goal is to document the behavior, 2 videos would have been enough. What's the difference between filming 2 and filming 5? It goes beyond just evidence collection. It starts to feel invasive. And beyond the number of videos, here's the real issue. It's one thing to give the footage to Wuhan University or submit it in court. That's legitimate. But uploading it online, that clearly crosses a line. Whether or not the boy was actually harassing her, filming his crotch and putting that footage on the internet without his consent is almost certainly illegal. Let's flip the situation again. If someone took a video of me from under the table while I was doing Wang Ju's verdict and then uploaded a close-up of my crotch online, whether it's a man or a woman filming, it would be a violation of my privacy. If it were a woman doing that to me, I would consider it sexual harassment too. No question. So yeah, I think China's legal system is lagging behind here. Sexual harassment laws should apply equally. Men and women both need protection. Women can harass men. That's a reality, and it should be recognized in law. And honestly, if the guy decided to sue the girl for violating his privacy, I think there's a high chance she would lose.
你说了我这方，包括我这个人的态度，那学校一定会联系到我，但是我不愿意再经受这样的事情了。我现在希望毕业为主，可以吗？
可以，我也可以说你希望能够顺利毕业，不会再意外发生，这些我都可以讲。
但是今天的内容我也不希望发出去，因为我真的有比这件事情更重要的，我的个人生活和我的个人学业更重要。
在您发帖的时候，你没有考虑到你在发这个帖子的时候，对他人造成的个人生活、个人学业也会有巨大影响吗？
我那件事情的关键不是对他造成多大的影响，我是希望学校尽快的处理这件事情，可以吗？
Third, after going through this whole case, I think the core problem with this girl is that she was using weakness to bully someone who was also weak. The word weak here needs quotation marks. You can see it in the way she treated the boy. She spoke to him very harshly throughout. But it wasn't that she used strength to bully him. It's not a case of strong bullying weak. Why not? Because she saw herself as the weak one. She believed, I'm a woman, I've been sexually harassed, I'm standing up for my rights. But actually, in this situation, the boy was the weaker one. That's what the final twist of this whole story showed. People began to feel that the girl was the one doing the bullying. Not by using strength, but by using her identity as someone weak. She believed, I'm a woman, I've been harassed, all you men are up to no good, so what's wrong with me standing up for myself? And that mindset led to the result we see now. Personally, I think this is more like a case of school bullying. Not in the usual sense, but still bullying. Of course, this topic goes a lot deeper. So I'll stop here for today. In the next day or two, I'll do another video to talk about the deeper background behind all of this. That's all I wanted to share today. Thank you.
直接挂到朋友圈。我在这个地方，我这个地方待了4年，3年马上4年了。只要我想，我朋友圈立马就可以找到你是谁，可以把视频都发出去的。我已经发上心了，我通过私下解决，我没有扩到网上去。我要求你当你的辅导员，给我一个正式的官方的道歉，是一个很过分的事。
那我们现在就是找出来哪在？
你先给我看你的智慧乐家，我会私下去找。我今天不跟你一块出去，我会跟你自己去的。
你觉得说我会加害你？
我打不过你，你都可以这样子了，我可以好坏想法。我要看你的智慧乐家是你的。